We all want to be happier, but how do we get there? First, we start by realizing happiness is not a destination. Being happy consists of micro action steps every single day. I'm your host, Brittany King, and I'm here to guide you along the way. Hello, my beautiful friend, and welcome back to the Positively Real podcast. I'm your host and coach, Brittany King. We got another episode today about emotional liberation. Something that I've been loving seeing is how people are responding to the Inside Out 2 movie, which is the inspiration for this podcast series. And it just makes me so happy. I remember seeing the first one and just feeling so seen. And the second one just did not disappoint. And there's just so many lessons from it. And I've just been seeing so many people share about it, which just makes me so happy because I think something that we never used to talk about, which is emotions, because we used to label it as fluffy or unimportant or too sensitive or whatever the messaging is changing. And we're seeing it. Also, probably my RAS is working overtime, which is that filtering system of filtering in the things that I think are most important, which right now are feelings. And we got big feelings. We got big feelings up in this house. I will say before, I had such an epic meltdown this morning. It was insane. And I did all the things. In the morning, I had time to meditate. I had time to connect with myself. And I got so triggered by a mess that led to another mess. And I am by no means like a clean freak. And I don't, and maybe it was like the trigger was just feeling out of control. But it was really intense, and it was I felt for my daughter because she didn't do anything wrong. My reaction was so inappropriate, and I'm sharing this with you because it's this work in real time, and I'm so grateful for this work to be able to recognize the feelings that I did not regulate, could not manage, that they were bigger than me, but then also having the awareness to regulate after and process after. And then, most importantly, bring in self compassion. And I didn't always used to be like this. I would judge myself. I could feel the shame try to like creep up. So I was like, it was intense. And what's awesome is it was only 10 minutes. Um, and I recovered, I repaired with my daughter, apologized to her, let her know that mommy had big feelings that she did not know how to manage. And let her know that she's not responsible for my feelings. And this is so hard. This is so hard. Let me tell you, it is not easy to do this, but it does feel very freeing afterwards. But besides apologizing to my daughter for my over inappropriate behavior, I had to repair with myself. I had to really connect with myself and have so much compassion. And I did feel guilty and not shameful. And that's a huge shift for me because shame is that I'm wrong, which I always default to. And guilt is more, I did something wrong and I didn't love it. And I can actually learn from it. And it's not like the type of guilt that's empty. Like it's actually productive. I felt guilty in not a criticizing judgmental way. It was so much compassion. I really had so much compassion for myself, and I plan to continue to reflect on this. But anyway, I'm sharing it with you because this is the power of knowing our emotions and how important it is to know our emotions. So today we're going to talk about the dynamic duo of courage and fear. Courage and fear. Courage and fear. Yeah, we're gonna talk about courage. I feel like we need like a theme song with courage and fear. But you can't have one without the other, and they both feel very similar, but one is more debilitating and the other is just showing up and doing things regardless of the fear. So I'm really excited to talk about this today because courage and fear are essential for growth. And if you listen to my podcast, you know I'm all about helping you grow, tap into your potential, really come home to yourself, right? Like I think it's this we associate growth with this outside thing that we're not yet, but it's really the coming back to us, our essence. That's where all the answers lie. So if you want to grow, it doesn't exist without courage or fear. So we're going to break it down. Let's break down what fear is and why we have it and it's important to our life and how it controls 90% of us and all the things that we do or don't do. But the basic explanation of fear, it's a natural emotional response to perceived threats or danger. Perceived is the key word. And so the purpose of this emotion, it's a very important purpose. It protects us from danger. So it triggers that fight or flight response within our nervous system. It is very important. It's an evolutionary. We have evolved because of fear. It has kept us safe from harm. It's what stops us from walking in the middle of the street. It's what stops us from putting our hand on a hot stove when we know the stove is hot, right? It's the thing that helps us from falling, right? Like if we're on a really high ladder, fear of falling, fear prevents us from getting seriously hurt. So I just want to acknowledge and validate the fear that you experience. It's a valid emotional natural response as a human being. And the problem is with fear, it's perceived. So most of the time, the fear that's coming up is actually not dangerous to us. There are certain things that, yes, there is some real danger, and the fear is very helpful. But for the most part, it just stops us from growing and evolving. It stops us from putting ourselves out there. It stops us from asking for what we want. It stops us from a lot of things. And fear shows up as perfectionism. It shows up as procrastination. It shows up as indecision. It's the master of disguise, I always say. And so we really want to acknowledge fear. And one of the most practical things that you can do is acknowledge it without judgment and say to yourself, it's okay to feel afraid, especially when you're trying something new or you're doing something new for the first time. I think one of the main points that I want to touch on with fear is it often, like all of our other emotions, are tied to just this level of vulnerability. There's a lot of fear with the unknown of how someone's going to respond to something that we do, something we put out there, or when life is uncertain. And whenever things are uncertain, fear is very loud. And we find that uncertainty means danger, and it doesn't. The truth is, uncertainty means possibility. I think during COVID, this was very much a very good example of this because there was so much uncertainty with the virus and everything that was going on and the shutdowns and all the things. And so fear was at an all-time high, and everybody's nervous systems were just like super activated. It was so intense, right? So fear comes from that state of being vulnerable, right? Like trying something new for the first time, or from when things are uncertain and you're facing an unknown, like a move or going to a new state or ending a relationship. I mean, there's a lot that's tied to it. So the thing with fear is it actually helps you evolve into the person you want to be. And fear actually leads to courage, and courage is what we actually need for growth. So, what I like to do is I like to reframe fear as an opportunity to be courageous, because fear and courage feel the same. Like fear feels like your butt is about to fall off, or your heart is in your stomach, your palms are sweaty or hot, you're nervous, afraid. Um, but courage feels very similar, but the difference with courage is like when you're reframing courage or you're cultivating courage, you do it anyway. And that's courage, that saying, feel the fear and do it anyway. It's really courage that drives the action. Fear debilitates us. Fear pauses us. Like when we're procrastinating, it's coming from fear, right? Not doing it perfect, getting something wrong, fear of failure. So fear is really debilitating. Courage actually springs us into action. So we feel it, but we still show up anyway. So that's fear. And then there's courage. Courage is the ability to face fear, pain, or adversity with bravery. Courage and bravery go hand in hand. It enables us to take action despite feeling vulnerable, exposed, or uncertain. So this is very important distinction. Fear stops us from moving forward. Courage helps us move forward. It enables us to move forward. And so the way that I like to think about courage is it's a skill. I don't think it's something that we innately have because we are creatures that have our sole purpose is survival. So we don't necessarily cultivate courage automatically. We have fear, which stops us for moving forward. But courage can be something that you develop with practice. So taking small steps to face unknown, to be vulnerable, to put yourself out there builds courage over time. And that's the key word, is over time. And so being able to show up and be courageous and feel courage and take action can actually inspire others. And I think that's something that I am very proud of, is especially with my business and just my backstory and everything that I've shared on the podcast with clients and in between. I don't have anything anyone else doesn't have. But I was really able to transform my fear that I had into courage. And it was like the courage is what drove me forward to take action, to start a business, have no idea what I'm doing, feel completely over my head, and still show up and still do it and be consistent. And I love to be that example for other people, because I tell people all the time, like, if I can do it, so can you. I mean, especially the clients that I work with, they are so much more capable. They are so creative, so smart, and just intelligent. I am always mind blown by the women that I work with, because they are just so brilliant in so many capacities. And I'm like, you have way better skill set than I have to go after what you want, right? And so I like to just be that example of courage for other people. And so when you share your courageous moments with others, it inspires them, it expands them, it encourages them, it shows them what's possible and allows you to be that example for them. And then one day they'll be that example for someone else. And it's just the gift that keeps on giving. And when we think about courage, and same thing with fear, it's that fear of being vulnerable, of being exposed, being seen, like being really seen for who you are. And that's very scary for a lot of us, myself included. Courage is embracing the vulnerability. Courage is like, this is who I am. And when you accept yourself, it's so much easier to be courageous and vulnerable. And having difficult conversations and staying grounded requires courage. And you have to have courage to be vulnerable. And I think vulnerability and courage, and I know Brene Brown talks about this a lot, really go hand in hand. So practicing courage. This is something that, again, is a skill, and it involves taking risks and being open and embracing failure. I've done a whole podcast about failure and what actually failure is. And there's no such thing as failure. It's all about learning and lessons. The only failure is if you don't apply the lessons that are at hand. And that's how you build courage. It's like the more you fail and you fail forward, which means like you make a mistake, you learn, you get back up and apply it, the more courage to continue to show up builds, and it builds and builds over time. So taking small risks is a huge thing. I'm a I consider myself a big risk taker. It's funny because my husband is a financial advisor and he is very conservative. He's not a risk taker, and we really complement each other well. But I think developed the skill set of not being afraid of failure because of the courageous steps I've taken moving forward. And it really all stemmed from starting a business. Like, starting a business is literally one of the most transformational spiritual experiences of my life. And I'm very grateful for it. So, can you start with practicing courage and cultivating more courage is set small, courageous goals, just small things that are one or two little things that you can do, and celebrate your progress along the way. One of the things that I've talked to many of my clients about that have this fear, or this, yeah, fear of being rejected, tied to the core wound of I will be rejected or I am rejected. One of the things that I've shared with them, and I watched on a TED talk, and I'll put it in the show notes. It was like 100 rejections. And this guy literally like just would ask random people random questions, knowing that like it'd be kind of absurd, knowing that most people would say no, kick rocks. But the whole point of it was the more he got rejected, the less he feared it. And it was still uncomfortable to ask, the bus driver if he could drive the bus or whatever. But the more he did it, it was kind of like exposure therapy. And I recommend this to my clients that have that fear of rejection. If they don't have an opportunity to speak in front of people or put themselves in a position where they can get rejected, actively doing these things can really help build this skill set of courage. So 10 out of 10 recommend that. I'll put the TED Talk in the show notes because it's phenomenal and it's just a great way to reframe rejection and knowing that like you're not going to die. We get it. Like rejection is terrifying. That's why we're so afraid of failing and we're so afraid of being rejected because primitively rejection means death. And in our modern time, if you get rejected, it just means it wasn't meant for you. It doesn't mean you're going to die, but your body, your nervous system, unless you do the work to regulate, thinks that you're going to die. It feels like you've just entered this like dark pit, this hole. So that's courage. So fear paralyzes us from taking action. Courage springs us and enables us to take action. So that's a really big distinction between the two. They feel the same in our body, similar to excitement and nervousness, feel very same. Physiologically, the sensations feel very much the same. So it's really important to distinguish what those feel like for you so you know. So courage and fear. Courage exists because of fear. I'm going to say that again. Courage exists because of fear. Without fear, there would be no need for courage. So the courage to speak in public, right, comes from the fear of judgment. So we have these fears, right, of like judgment or getting rejected, or what if no one likes you, or what if you forget what you're going to say, or what if I sound dumb? But you still show up and you still speak in front of people because that takes courage. And the more that you can face your fears and embrace your fears, the more courage you're going to build. When you can manage the fear, when you can identify what it is, it will strengthen your ability to have courage to take steps. So when you're faced with fear, just again, checking in with how your body feels, like think about one step, one small step you can take to build your courage. That's all you have to do is focus on one step at a time. And so I want you to take a minute, whether you or do it now, you can pause or after the episode, but reflect on any past experiences where you've acted courageously despite fear. When have you showed up? That's how you know you're feeling the emotion of courage, because you showed up and you took action anyway. I can think of so many things I could rattle off, but I really want to invite you to do that so you can see that you actually have access to fear, and it's because you allow access to courage, I should say, and it's because you allowed yourself to feel fear, to know what fear is, to know that it exists and when it exists in your body. So, some practical strategies that you can do to manage fear. Number one is just staying present and noticing. And I love to ask myself, is this real fear? Like, is there a real danger? I like to identify what I think the threat is. And then I like to debunk it. Is this real fear? Like, am I actually in danger? And when you are mindful, it will really help you reduce the anxiety, because anxiety masks fear, and get to really the root of it. I remember the first time I really processed fear from a deep childhood wound. It was so intense. I felt so afraid. But then once I allowed myself to feel it, I felt so much lighter. And it was just like allowing myself to be present with the emotion. And so gradually exposing yourself to fears and gradually exposing yourself to the emotion of fear will ultimately build courage. For me, it helped me build courage to sit with my emotions because I felt so unsafe to do so. So, one thing that you can do with fear is create a fear ladder and take small steps up to it, one step at a time. So you can kind of see there's a pattern here, the things that I'm sharing, because what that means is the smaller the step, the easier it is to implement. Okay. So when you can do this regularly and have some sort of daily practice around it or awareness, then you will eventually build in these bigger steps. But when you can take these smaller steps, it makes it just a little bit more manageable. So, a fear ladder, let's talk about what a fear ladder is. So, a fear ladder is a tool that's used in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, to help you gradually face and overcome fears by breaking them down into small, manageable steps. So it helps systematically desensitize oneself to inducing situations, making them less intimidating over time. So similar to that TED talk with like the rejection, I mean, he kind of like went all in, but it's similar to that. It's almost like exposure therapy, right? But it's more gradual because facing fears gradually reduces anxiety and then ultimately builds confidence. And then the smaller the steps are, the less overwhelming and more attainable, which then leads to more consistent progress versus that all or nothing mentality. So the way that this works is very simple is create your fear ladder. So number 1, choose a specific fear. So maybe you have a fear you want to work on like public speaking or social interactions or flying, or maybe it's just maybe you have an idea or you want to start a business and you're terrified of what could happen. Then you want to be specific. So clearly define define the fear and clearly define the fear to address it effectively. So don't be vague, be specific. Then break it down. List all of the fear inducing situations. Create a list of situations related to the fear, ranging from least to most frightening. And then order by intensity. So rank the situations from least scary, bottom of the ladder, to most scary, top of the ladder. And the way that this would work, for example, with public speaking, would be bottom of the ladder would be practice speaking in front of the mirror. Second rung would be record yourself speaking and watch the video. Third would be speaking in front of a close friend or family member. 4, ask a small group that you feel safe around to practice in front of them. 5, volunteer to speak in a larger group setting or a local meetup. And then the top rung would be give a presentation or speech in front of a large audience. So obviously this isn't like check it off the list. Like this happens gradually over time, but it's really important to start small. Start small. So start with the least scary step. Start with the lowest hanging fruit. Then you work your way up. Once more comfortable with the first one, it's not just one and done. You can do it over and over again. Move up the rung. Then the next one, same thing. Share your progress with someone, like let them know what you're working on. And then continuing to work your way up the ladder. And know that setbacks are a part of it. It's not even though it's a ladder, it's not a linear process. Like there's going to be some highs and lows and you might feel overwhelmed at times. So it's okay to come back down to a previous step that feels a little bit more comfortable before moving forward. So if you do this, have it be a consistent daily practice, have it be small, be implemented into your daily routine. Make sure you celebrate your progress and ask for help. Ask for accountability. Ask for someone to help you really face this fear so it's no longer debilitating and it turns into courage because it's what we want. We want the courage to show up. And sometimes if you're like me, you like to just rip the band-aid off and shove yourself into situations. Or if you want to be a little bit more intentional, then you would do this strategy of this fear ladder. Okay. So that's strategy 1. And then strategy number 2 before we wrap up, because this is something that I use with my clients often. And I think it's also really important because, like all emotions, they're trying to tell us something, they're trying to communicate with us. So if you have a fear of something, let's say a fear of being alone, write down what you're afraid of, be specific and be detailed. Don't just write, I'm afraid of being alone. Like get really into the nitty gritty so you can understand the depths of this fear. Once you do that, then you want to ask yourself, is this fear based on real immediate danger or is it a perceived threat? And rate the likelihood of this feared event happening from a scale of 1 to 10 because it really helps start to take away the intensity of it. So typically with the fear, it's like, is our ego being threatened? That's a perceived threat, or am I in real danger right now? Then you go into the next step, which is, what is my fear telling me? Determine what this fear is trying to protect you from, because that's all. It's important. It's evolutionary. We need it. Write down the potential underlying emotions, right? So it could be fear of failure, fear of rejection, could be fear of success, could be fear of the unknown. Get into it. Ask fear. Hey, fear, what's up? See, you're here. What are you trying to tell me? And then the next step is challenge the fear. Examine the evidence for the fear and against the fear. Write down past experiences where you might have overcome similar fears, but always like give yourself the space to have a different interpretation of what's going on. You could be afraid that you're going to fall on your face and die and everyone's going to laugh at you and that was going to be the end of your life. Or there might be an argument for against the fear, that like this isn't actually real fear. And that will help again take away the intensity. I also love looking at past experience where you do have evidence where you've overcome similar situations where you felt fear, because that also just helps you direct your brain in times that you've been successful, and it helps you strengthen that evidence versus the evidence that is supporting the fear of you not moving forward, you not taking action. And then that leads into the next step is take action. Create a small actionable plan to face the fear. So you could incorporate both of these strategies. You could use the fear ladder to incorporate after you challenge. Is it real? What's it telling me? Like after identifying. So identify, is it real? What is it telling me? Challenging the fear and then taking action. So you could turn that into a fear ladder and work your way up the rung, right? It's not linear. It's not like, okay, got to go up, check it off the list, but it just shows you step by step little ways that you can turn that fear into courage. And so that's really what I have. I mean, when I think about fear and courage, we need it. We need it. We need to take action. We needed to show up. We needed to know when we have our own back. And I think through these daily practices and really simple techniques, it can really help you transform your fear and turn it into courage. So, if you can develop a mindset that values courage and vulnerability, practice mantras that will help support this. Look for evidence in way that you have been courageous. It really makes such a difference. And if you have something that you've been wanting to do or create in your life, but you've been afraid, I hope that these practical, simple steps can help transform that fear into courage so you can show up and take action and create what you want to create in the world. All right, my friend, that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I appreciate you so much. If you're listening to this as it comes out right now, I am 38 weeks pregnant, waiting for baby to arrive. So I've just been recording content for you while I am away on maternity leave. Um, so I won't be coaching for quite some time. But of course, if you're interested in coaching, I will be opening up some one-on-one spots towards the beginning of the year. So if you're interested in coaching, this is a perfect time to let me know so I can reach out to you. If not, keep listening to the podcast. This is like having a coach in your ear. If you are a client or a past client, it's like just little helpful reminders of our coaching calls. But I'm here to support you. I love you so much. I hope you have a beautiful day. Until next time, remember to love yourself, own your happiness, and let your light shine because you're so worthy of it. Till next time.